day to each and every one of you, hospitality management students. Welcome to Tour 3, Tourism Planning and Development. For today's lesson, we are going to talk about the prerequisites for sustainable tourism. So before we discuss, after reading the module or after you watch the lesson video, you should be able to, number 1, reiterate the principles of tourism. Number 2, define tourism potential analysis and gradualism. Number 3, differentiate types of location. Number 4, discuss the tourism infrastructure and personal security. So before we discuss this lesson, let us first define what is prerequisite. So when we say prerequisite, these are the things that is required or are required as a prior condition for something else to happen or exist. Meaning sa Tagalog, ito yung mga kondisyon. Ito yung mga kailangan, mga necessary, needed, or essential natin na magawa before we have a sustainable tourism. Okay, so the principles of sustainable tourism. So it says here that there are some ideas, some of the foundations or elements of sustainable tourism. Number 1 is the conservation and renewal of tourism resources is the goal of sustainable tourism. So ano ba yung sinasabi natin na conservation? So when we say conservation, this is a preservation or efficient use of resources. Ibig sabihin, ang sinasabi natin sa term na conservation, our aim here is to have a careful preservation and protection of our nature. Ibig sabihin, yung paggamit natin ng tama sa ating mga resources, lalong-lalo na sa natural resources. So, when it comes to the renewal of tourism resources, we have two kinds of resources. We have the renewable resources and the non-renewable resources. So, kindly take note of this. So, when we say renewable resources, these are the elements that can be replenished over time through a natural process. For example, yung pagsasaka. 'Di ba? Pag nag-harvest ka, mga ilang panahon lang or ilang days lang, ilang weeks, pwede ka na ulit magtanim. So, that is renewable resources. Ibig sabihin, ito yung mga elements na kung saan pwede natin siyang ma-replenish, pwede ulit natin siyang magamit. Unlike kay non-renewable resources, it is the same thing, natural resources din siya, pero ito yung mga hindi agad-agad mapapalitan na mga resources. So, these are the resources that will eventually run out. Pag naubos siya, hindi siya ganun kadaling ibalik. Hindi ganun kadaling bumalik ulit yung mga resources na to para magamit ng mga tao. So, continuity of tourism depends on the existence of high-quality tourist attraction. So, alam naman natin that tourism is dependent sa mga tourist attraction. Kasi kung wala naman tayong attractions, we don't have certain destination, tourist spots, and so on, wala din namang pupuntahan yung mga turista. So, in that way, hindi rin tayo makakapag-generate ng income. So, regardless of the economic system, tourism depends on the government, private sector cooperation, entrepreneurship, and risk-taking. So, for a certain individual or for a certain business to grow, dapat talaga may tulong ng government, may tulong ni private sector, or kung ikaw man ay isang entrepreneur or ikaw man ay isang risk taker. So, ibig sabihin, yung ekonomiya ng isang bansa, hindi lang siya basta nakatuon sa isang side. Usually, para talaga mag-grow yung economy ng isang bansa, or let's say, para mag-grow yung tourism industry, dapat may tulungan ng bawat sector. Kahit yan is public sector or kahit yan is private sector. So, community support and cultural tolerance are essential for tourism prosper. So, ano ba yung sinasabi nating community support? So, basically, when we say community support, this is the what we call system support na pwede natin siyang i-organize through different groups and organization. So, within the community, di ba, there are families, there are individuals, there are professionals. So, magkakaroon ng collaboration, pwedeng magtulong-tulungan yung mga grupo na yon in order for the tourism industry to boost para mas lumago pa siya. So, when we say cultural tolerance naman, this is the recognition of the universal human rights and freedom of others. So, ibig sabihin, ang aim natin sa cultural tolerance is about giving the acceptance of different people without judgment. Okay? Ibig sabihin, cultural tolerance sa isang community kasi, di ba, iba-iba tayo. Magkakaibang family, iba-ibang mga professionals yan, iba-ibang lifestyle, and so on. So, ang goal ni cultural tolerance is to have that kind of acceptance sa ibang tao without judgment. Kasi 'di ba, kapag may pumuntang turista sa isang lugar, you cannot judge the tourist based on their physical attributes, based on the way they talk, and so on. So next one is the personal security of tourists and political stability of the country must be ensured. So, aside from the tourist attractions, the destination or the tourist spots na gustong-gustong puntahan ng mga turista, ang ating pinaka-aim din talaga or ang pinaka-importante is the security of the tourists. If you are not secured in that kind of place, bakit ka pa pupunta doon? Bakit ka pa mag-i-stay doon? And of course, yung tinatawag nating political stability, it is a measure of the perception regarding the probability that the government will be destabilized. Ibig sabihin, political stability sa isang bansa, we want na yung political system nila, 'di ba? Yung mga officials from the government, yung mga official from the different department, organization is maayos. Because sometimes in a particular country, andyan yung terrorism, andyan yung war. So, ibig sabihin, ang isang bansa, kapag ganun yung kanilang status, ganun yung kanilang situation, most likely, walang secured na tourist. 'Di ba? Hindi secured yung mga turista, same with the locals in that country. So, tourists themselves must be prepared to play their part in the sustainable tourism. So, syempre, hindi lang naman yung mga departments, hindi lang naman yung government, private sector, yung mga local people or the host community, yung kikilos. Of course, the tourists, tayo mismo na mga turista kapag nagpunta tayo sa isang lugar, of course, we have to play our parts. Ibig sabihin, gawin natin yung parte natin sa isang lugar kung saan tayo pupunta. Regardless kung yan is tungkol sa mga waste sa basura, yung simpleng pagtapon ng basura, yung simpleng pagsunod sa tourism policy. So, lahat ng yun is makakatulong in order for us to have a sustainable tourism. So, those are the principles of sustainable tourism. So, next one is the international and domestic sustainable tourism demand. So, merong nabanggit dito na isang organization which is the World Commission on Environment and Development. So, ito is currently, or as of now, it is known as the Bulent Commission. So, before, ang tawag sa kanya is the World Commission on Environment and Development, but as of now, ang tawag na sa kanya is the Bulent Commission. So, basically, itong organization na to or association na to, ang kanilang aim is to unite countries to pursue sustainable development together. Kasi 'di ba, it is being established by the United Nations. So ibig sabihin, ang pinaka-goal nila is bawat bansa magtulungan in order for us to have a sustainable development. Not just in terms of tourism, but also of course in other field of the country. So, they define sustainable development as a progress that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. So, even before we are really defining kung ano si sustainable development. So, it is a progress, it is a process na wherein we are going to meet the needs of the present. Okay? So, pupunan natin yung mga kailangan ng mga tao ngayon. Pero hindi natin i-compromise yung mga gagamitin nating resources para mapunan yung pangailangan nila ngayon sa mga tao na nakaabang pa for the future generation. Because the future generations also have their own needs. meron din silang mga pangangailangan, meron din silang mga wants na katulad natin na nandito ngayon sa present generation. So, the operative concept in this definition is sustainability is the key condition for promoting and continuing the tourism demand. So, basically, the term sustainability is really important in all aspects, lalong-lalo na kay tourism. So, in planning and promoting sustainable tourism, the following issues are considered. Of course, when we want to promote a certain destination, when we want to have a sustainable tourism, ito commonly yung mga issues na pwede nating bigyan ng pansin agad para hindi na siya mag-cause ng sobrang daming problema sa isang area. So, number 1 is the natural and man-made cultural environmental resources. So, dito naman sinasabi lang that a certain country, or let's say a certain place, a certain location, talagang merong existing na natural, man-made, cultural, environmental resources. So, kaya lang kasi, ang pinaka-prone dito sa danger, or ang pinaka-prone sa mga natural disasters, is the natural resources. Because sabi nga natin, the natural resources cannot easily be replenished. Hindi agad-agad siya mapapalitan, hindi agad-agad siya mag-e-exist. Usually, it will take time, it will take years and many years to come para siya is mapunan. So, unlike kay man-made resources na gawa ng tao, basta meron kang available na materials, available na mga resources, usually pwede naman din ulit silang i-rehabilitate, pwede ulit silang i-renovate. So, tourism must be beneficial for the receiving destination. So, sino ba yung mga receiving destination na yan? Of course, it is the region, the country, the state, di ba? Yung mga iba't ibang areas within the country. Of course, a particular tourism industry should have its benefit. Ibig sabihin, meron kang makukuhang something positive dito sa pag-promote mo ng sustainable tourism. Not just, of course, gaganda yung environment, mas magiging maayos yung ating kapaligiran, yung ating mga natural resources, but at the same time, the local community, the government, and the people around the destination will also benefit. So, maintaining and renewing tourism product and benefits and costs must be politically acceptable. So, syempre, yung cost na mga expenses, it should be acceptable para sa mga national, regional, and destination level. Kahit anong part man yan or anong level man yan ng tourism, it should be acceptable with regards to the cost. So, syempre, pag nag-promote tayo kasi, pag in-enhance natin yung ating environment, of course, may mga projects, may mga dapat talaga tayong gastusin. So, it should be acceptable, makatarungan. Hindi yung mag-i-implement tayo ng budget, magpo-propose tayo ng budget, pero hindi naman para sa environment na pupunta. Okay. So, next one is the international tourism and the domestic tourism. So, it says here that initially, separating the international tourism demand from the domestic tourism demand is desirable when cultural, income, purpose, and other characteristics demonstrate a considerable gap between the two types of tourism. So, sinasabi natin dito, ano ba yung pagkakaiba ni international tourism and domestic tourism? Of course, pag international tourism, you are going to go outside the country. Lalabas ka na ng sarili mong bansa. But when we say domestic tourism, it is a kind of tourism industry na within the country. So, kasi 'di ba, iba yung demand, iba yung laki ng demand kapag international tourism at domestic tourism. So, most likely ang isang tao or ang isang tourist, kung siya is wala pa namang sapat na pera, wala pa siyang, let's say, disposable income, at wala pa siyang kakayahan na pumunta international sa mga international countries, most likely, ang ipapatronize niya is yung mga lugar within the country. So, that is what we call domestic tourism. So, sabi dito, whether it is an international tourism or domestic tourism, both types should meet the 5 A's of tourism. So, ano ba yung 5 A's of tourism? Ano ba yung 5 na yon? 5 A ng tourism. So, those are the access, the accommodation, attraction, activities, and the amenities. So, lahat dapat yon, lahat ng elements na yon should exist in a particular country or in a particular kind of tourism. So, sabi nga dito, tourism demand requires the existence of attractions and minimum basic tourist facilities. So, of course, sa simula, minimum pa lang talaga yung mga basic tourist facilities. Hindi pa ganun kabongga, hindi pa ganun kadami yung facilities within the area. Pero pag yan is na-develop, di ba, pinatronize, nagkaroon ng mataas na marketing strategy, nagkaroon ng, let's say, income or profit yung mismong tourist destination na yun together with the locals, mas may enhance yung mga facilities within the area. So, next one is the 2 terms about tourism potential analysis and the gradualism. So, ano ba yung sinasabi nating tourism potential analysis? So, when we say tourism potential, it is the initial step for determining the availability and quality of the tourism product. So, aside from that, according sa research, tourism potential is about the sum. Okay? Pinagsama-samang natural, anthropogenic, o pag sinabi nating anthropogenic, these are the human activities o gawa ng tao, and material resources. And of course, the conditions necessary for a destination management. So, ibig sabihin sa isang lugar, we are going to determine ano ba yung mga available na resources dito sa particular lugar na to. Ito bang mga resources na to, meron siyang high quality, low quality? Meron bang enough na mga activities na pwede gawin sa isang lugar na to? So basically, you are going to analyze the potentiality of a particular destination. Next one is the gradualism. So when we say gradualism, it's the best government strategy at the time of initiating tourism development. Kasi pag sinabi natin gradualism, these are the principle or policy of achieving some goals by gradual steps rather than drastic change. So, ibig sabihin, ito usually yung mga ideas natin or strategy ng gobyerno na gagawin nila yung kanilang mga goals ng paunti-unti, gradual. Ibig sabihin, hindi bibiglain. Kasi minsan, kapag bibiglain natin, halimbawa, mag-i-implement tayo ng ganitong policy, ng ganitong activity, hindi naman pa natin nakikita kung ito ba is papatok sa lugar na yon. Usually, we need to take it one step at a time. Kaya siya sinabing gradualism, paunti-unti. So, slow and consistent process of change in the whole population. So, that is gradualism. So, as tourism economy expands, human-made attractions are added to the tourism product by restoring historic sites, older monuments, and buildings. So, international tourists are encouraged to conform to and respect local culture, customs, and living conditions to receive maximum satisfaction from their experience. So, sinasabi natin dito na of course, kapag ang isang ekonomiya, particularly tourism industry, pag yan is lumago, usually the human-made or the man-made attractions, talagang papatok din siya. So, ibig sabihin, kapag hit na natin, let's say, yung stagnation stage, di ba? Yung consolidation stage, yung decline stage, usually we need to restore those places or those tourist attraction para nang sa ganun, mapuntahan ulit siya ng mga tao. So, aside from that, sinasabi din dito that the international tourists, tayo, kunyari, nagpunta tayo sa ibang bansa, we are encouraged, actually, I think it is really a mandatory thing for us to conform. Ibig sabihin, sumunod. Diba? For us to conform and respect yung mga culture within the area. Okay? The customs, yung kanilang practices, yung pamumuhay nila, living conditions. Okay? For us to receive a maximum satisfaction from the experience. Kasi we are not going to a particular destination na ang aim natin bastusin yung kultura nila. Ang aim natin magkalat sa kalsada, magkalat sa kung saan-saan. Of course, kung ano yung culture nila, ano yung practices nila sa lugar, yun yung kailangan nating sundin. So, basically, those are the prerequisites. Yun yung mga kondisyon para tayo magkaroon ng sustainable tourism. So, attractions as a primary draws of the tourism product. So, alam naman natin that tourism attraction are the raison d'etre of the tourism. So, pag sinabing raison d'etre, usually, ito yung sinasabi natin na reason. Okay? Reason or justification in a particular area or existence. So, ibig sabihin, ang dahilan kung bakit nag-e-exist si tourism is because of the tourism attraction. They are the targets, the purpose, and objects of interest. So, yaang man-made attraction na yan, yaang human-made attraction, or let's say yung natural attraction, event attraction, site attraction, they are the targets, the purposes, and the objects of interest. And what draws the visitor is of course the attraction. They want to experience their needs and their wants within the attraction. So, what are the attributes of attraction? So, even before, ito na-discuss na sa inyo. So, there's no need to elaborate further because I know that all of you, you already know the characteristics of a attraction. So, natural or man-made, it is fixed or mobile, new or ancient, large or small. The attraction can be temporary or permanent. It may be designed for some type of human activity. And most likely, it is a unique, okay, either by themselves or in association with other attraction as a group. So, those are the attributes of attractions. So, the next one is, what are the things one should look for in evaluating tourism potential of a country, region, or destination? So, ano daw ba yung kailangan nating tingnan in order for us to evaluate kung ano ba yung potential ng isang tourist destination sa isang bansa, sa isang rehiyon, or sa isang destinasyon. So, number one, of course, the elements of tourism product. So, all of those elements should be unique in the eyes of tourists. Kailangan muna natin malaman, kailangan natin ma-identify ano yung mga elements na to. And as I've mentioned earlier, there are 5 elements or 5 A's of tourism. The access, the accommodation, the attraction, the activities, and the amenities. Of course, you need to know if that area is accessible. Kung yung area na yan is accessible, kayang mapuntahan, madaling puntahan, usually dapat may accommodation within the area. For people who will stay for a long time, let's say overnight, 'di ba? More than a day, 3 days, 2 nights, and so on. Of course, if there is an accommodation, there should be an attraction. Hindi lang isa, kundi madaming attraction na pwedeng puntahan yung mga turista. Within the attraction, there should also have a activity. Anong activity yan? Pwedeng water adventure, pwedeng let's say mga land adventure, ano yung mga activities na pwede within the beach, mga water adventure, and so on. And of course, there should be amenities. So, amenities and facilities also. So, in a given destination, dapat merong mga amenities na magsusupport doon sa 4 na elements. So, geography and cultural anthropology are the 2 major scientific disciplines used in this search. So, usually, ang geography naman, pag sinabi natin, diyan din nakatuon yung tinatawag natin na mga natural attractions natin like mountains, 'di ba? Saan siya located, kung gusto mo mag-hike, ano ba yung mga possible destination for hiking. And of course, cultural anthropology, so it is the study of how human ways of life in the broadest possible perspective. So when we say cultural anthropology, dito pinag-aaralan natin, ano ba'y kultura ng mga tao? Ano ba'y paniniwala nila? Ano yung mga practices? Ano yung mga values nila? ano yung ginagamit nilang technology for the meantime. Okay? Na nakakatulong para sila is mas mabuhay. And then of course, nakakatulong to para mas maintindihan natin yung particular people o yung mga particular area na pupuntahan natin. Next one is the types of location. So we have two types of location. We have the absolute location and the relative location. So pag sinabi nating absolute, it is the precise physical location of an attraction or facility. So pag sinabi nating absolute from the word itself, precise or fixed position. Okay? Usually, ito yung isang lokasyon na hindi naman nagbabago-bago. So, example niyan, yung exact address. 'Di ba? Yung exact address ng particular beach. Hindi mo naman pwedeng ilipat yung beach na yan na katulad ng ibang mga businesses na pag nagsara, 'di ba? Pwede silang lumipat sa isang lokasyon. Usually, absolute location, these are the fixed location of a particular destination. And of course, when we say relative location, it is a location of one place in relation to other places. So, example niyan, halimbawa, nagda-drive ka along the highway. Kasi gusto mong, along the highway, nagda-drive ka papunta sa beach. Kasi you want to spend some time sa beach. Halimbawa, magbabakasyon kayo. And now, you want to know how far the beach is. Gusto mong malaman kung gaano kalayo yung lugar na pupuntahan mo. And as you go along the way, may mga signages, di ba? May mga signages along the highway na sinasabi na, let's say, you are 15 kilometers away from the beach. So, that 15 kilometers away, yun yung tinatawag natin na relative location. Kasi as you go along the way habang nagta-travel ka, may mga iba ka pang mga spots na pwedeng makita aside from sa lugar na pinaka-pupuntahan mo. So, those are the two types of location, the absolute and the relative. So, next one is the tourism planner. So, sinasabi dyan, the tourism planner is concerned only about the tourism significance of location. Of course, sa tourism planner, it involves yung tinatawag na tourism planning. So, as a tourism planner, you are concerned about the significance of the area, but also you consider the needs of the people planning a trip and using those factors to determine the best resources, yung programs, yung activities sa kanilang trip. So, kaya nga, di ba, naging planner, you're going to plan about their travel. And you will consider the needs and the wants of the people involved. So, and of course, all tourism activities depend on special climate condition. It depends upon kung ano yung gusto mong puntahan na lugar. It depends upon kung anong climate condition yung gusto mong ma-experience. Kung gusto mong pumunta sa mga polar climate countries, 'di ba? Yung sa mga malalamig, you can go to Antarctica, you can go to Alaska if you want. Kung gusto mo naman ng tropical country, you can visit the Philippines, 'di ba? Or if you want to experience snow, you can go to United States, and some of the states there are now experiencing yung snow. So, it depends upon sa preference ng turista. So, an operating system for attractions, facilities, and activities. So, tourism industry is an integrated system for many functioning elements. So, tourism functions best when these elements interact with one another and with the elements of the world around them. So, as mentioned earlier, yung 5 elements, they should interact with one another. Hindi dapat mawawala yung accommodation, tapos may biglang activities lang. Hindi pwedeng accessible lang yung lugar, pero walang mapupuntahan. So, all of them should complement one another. Next one is the systems. Ano ba yung mga binabanggit natin na systems kanina? So, these are the free market capitalist economic system. So, ano yung sinasabi dito sa free market capitalist economic system? So, it operates under one set of guidelines. These guidelines are based on generating optimum profits and costs that the economy and the environment can sustain. So, dito kay free market, sinasabi dito that ang pinaka-aim nila is for the production and pricing of goods and services. And usually, dito sa kind ng economic system na to, kakaunti or no government regulation at all. And at the same time, they are competitive markets na involved dito sa economic system na to. So, the next one is the centrally planned economic system. So, in this kind of economic system, tinatawag din siyang command economy. Bakit command? Ba't sinabing ganon? Because the decisions on what to produce, how to produce, and for whom are taken by the government. Okay? Ang nagde-decide po niyan is the government themselves. So, the government dictates the operational guidelines from top to bottom. And of course, they're also profit motive. Okay? But ang kanilang pinaka-aim din is the benefit na makukuha ng society. So, next one is the two types of tourism organization. So, we have the private sector and the government sector. As you all know, there are large differences between the two. Kasi alam naman natin, pag private sector, usually, yung kanilang mga benefits na nakukuha is hindi ganun kadami. Kumbaga, if they are going to comply with a certain requirements, medyo hindi ganun kadali, unlike kay government sector. Of course, sa private sector organizations, dito naka-involve yung tinatawag na sole proprietorship, partnership, yung mga small and medium-sized businesses, yung mga large corporations, diba? Yung mga professional and trade association, tsaka yung mga trade and unions. So, lahat sila involved kay private sector organization. So, as for the government sector organization, anything that is being handled and managed by the government, so dyan sila naka-under. Okay, so next slide. So, in mixed economy system, government is more directly involved in the development of tourism. So, sa mix, from the word itself, pinaghalo-halo na. So, ibig sabihin, dito, involved na si capitalism tsaka si socialism. But most likely, ang kanilang pinaka-aim dito is to protect private property, the economic freedom, allow the government to interfere in the economic activity. So, ibig sabihin, kay mixed economy, involved na dito si private sector at si government sector. So, in both economic systems, two prerequisites emerge for planning and developing sustainable tourism: the initiative and risk-taking. So, you have to initiate, you have to have such kind of compassion para ikaw na mismo, di ba? As a private sector, as a government sector, dapat meron kang mga plano for our tourism industry. Kung ikaw ay isang resort hotel, you should also have a plan sa community. Meron ka bang, let's say, meron ka bang corporate goals? Meron ka pang mga corporate responsibility within the community na nakakatulong din sa environment. Nakakatulong din, let's say, nagkakaroon kayo ng fun run para yung donation sa fun run na yun o yung mga registration fee mapupunta sa let's say sa particular kind of location, destination para mas ma-rehabilitate pa yung particular area. And of course, risk-taking. There's no assurance in everything, so it's the same thing with sustainable tourism. You have to take the risk because hindi mo naman din alam if itong particular plan mo mag-work for a long time. And usually, when you create a plan, it will take, it should be a long-term plan, not a short-term. Kasi pag short-term, mabilis lang lumipas yung panahon. Dapat lagi kang ang pang long-term. Ibig sabihin, aside from the long-term plan, you should also have a backup plan or contingency plan. So, next one is the element of problem solving is a search. So, paghahanap. Of course, ang isang problema, hindi naman yan agad-agad masusolusyonan. So, you have to find or you have to search for the right information, the right object, the right person. And at the same time, it should be followed by the screening process. So, consists of reviewing elements that qualify as possible solution to the problems. So, as you search different kinds of information, objects, or person, alin sa kanila yung possible solution based dun sa mga na-search mo. Because let's say for example, si Boracay, di ba na-rehabilitate siya for 6 months. Madaming mga options na kinonsider. Si Boracay ba kailangan talagang ipasara? O kailangan muna siyang, let's say, kailangan ba siyang ipasara permanently? Temporary lang? Paano yung gagawin sa mga businesses within the area? So, of course, they search. The government search. The government try to respond doon sa solution until na mag-come up sila na i-rehabilitate si Boracay for 6 months. And after that, i-open na ulit siya sa public. So, the next one is the tourism infrastructure. So, ano naman yung sinasabi dito sa tourism infrastructure? So, when we say infrastructure, these are the basic physical system of a business region or nation. So, sabi dito, single-purpose infrastructure is often wasteful and should be avoided. We won't build an infrastructure na isa lang yung gamit, 'di ba? We want to build an infrastructure na multi-purpose, flexible, maraming gamit, maraming pwedeng paggamitan. So, what serves tourism is the sum total of basic facilities, equipment, and installations needed for a functioning tourism industry. So, ano-ano ba kasi yung mga infrastructures na to? Those are the buildings, roads, power supplies, transportation system, communication networks, yung mga sewage, mga drainage, water, and of course, the electric system. Those are the infrastructure. And you won't create a road, you won't create a building na alam mo namang walang masyadong magbe-benefit. 'Di ba? So, you have to create an infrastructure that will satisfy the service demands of both tourists and local population. Kapag maganda ang infrastructure ng isang bansa, usually, mas mataas yung tendency na maraming mga turistang pumunta. Because they see to it na itong lugar na to, itong tourist destination na to, maayos yung roads. 'Di ba? Hindi bako-bako, hindi sira-sira yung daan. May mga proper signages, nakalagay kung tsunami prone area ba yan, nakalagay kung ilang kilometers na lang papunta sa particular destination na to. So, ibig sabihin, it's all about building a multi-purpose, not a single-purpose infrastructure. So, it says here that there should be a feasibility study and market study. So, it is being required for project approval to evaluate the financial realism and the environmental, social, economic impacts of tourism development. So, bakit ba kasi tayo nagkikreate ng feasibility study? For us to assess, diba? For us to assess kung ito bang project na ginagawa natin is practical. Meron ba tong benefits, meron ba tong saysay kapag ginawa natin or isinakatuparan natin yung project na to. So, bago nga natin gawin yung project, we should conduct a feasibility study para ma-evaluate and ma-assess natin. And usually, yung mga relevant factors na ina-assess natin or mini-measure natin sa feasibility study, these are the economic factors, diba? The technical factors, the legal factors, and of course, yung scheduling consideration. Pag ba-create natin yung project na to, ilang years ba siya, ilang months ba siya bago matapos? Given the fact that the environment or let's say, yung mga natural disasters, hindi naman natin alam kung kailan sila darating. Kung kailan sila mag-e-exist or tatama sa isang lugar. So, those are the factors of feasibility study. So, community support and tolerance for visitors from other culture. So, dito as mentioned earlier, that culture is the totality of socially transmitted behavioral patterns, arts, beliefs, institution, and all other products of human activity and thought characteristic of a community or nation. So, pag sinabi natin culture, kabuuan, 'di ba? Kabuuan ng isang tao with regards to their behavior, sa kanilang paniniwala, sa arts, the institution, the sexuality, the race, the gender, and so on. And usually, when we work in a hospitality industry in the near future, kapag magtrabaho na kayo sa mga hotels, sa mga airlines, if you are going to be a tour guide, sa travel agency, ganon, so you will meet a lot of people. A lot of people from a diverse and rich culture sa iba't ibang bansa. So, kung ang attraction is may mga attributes, it's the same thing with culture. They also have several characteristics. So, culture has numerous and diverse traits. Culture is learned behavior. One is not born with it. Of course, it is being learned, and usually, it is being grouped in a particular society or community. So, yung culture na yan, natututunan. Hindi siya basta-basta nag-exist na pagkapanganak mo, ganito na. So, usually, you need to learn from the culture of your past generation. So, culture is the creation of the human mind and practice. It is not intuitive. So, when we say intuitive, most likely instinct or insight. Hindi basta-basta yung instinct mo is culture na yon. Usually, it is the creation of human mind and practice based on the practices, based on your lifestyle. Okay? So, culture spreads through communication. In what way? Of course, all of us has a different languages. We have different nationalities. So, it depends upon on how are you going to communicate with one people to another. So, culture is not limited to human acts, customs, or material possessions. It embraces a large field of human behavior and creativity. So, those are the characteristics of culture based on its definition. Next one is the term cultural diffusion. So, ano naman yung sinasabi nating cultural diffusion? So, it states that it is the process of spreading individual cultural traits from their source or to other areas. So, cultural diffusion. So, cultural diffusion is a process of spreading one culture, practices, beliefs, or even items such as food, music, diba? Yung mga material things natin. So, it can spread within the member of the culture and of course, from a different cultures around the world. So, ibig sabihin from the word itself, diffuse. Diba? Nag-i-spread, kumakalat. So, lately, hindi naman sa atin sikat yung mga songs from the other countries. But nowadays, even yung OPM music here in the Philippines, kumalat na sa ibang bansa. Other foreigners are fond of our music. Diba? Yung ating mga kanta, yung ating mga songs na sinusulat ng mga iba't ibang mga composers or ng mga artists. So, it's the same thing. Dati, hindi naman sikat yung mga iba't ibang beaches dito sa area natin or sa country natin. But because of the innovation, marketing strategy, diba? Unti-unting nakilala, kumalat, at nagustuhan ng ibang mga foreigners or ng mga people sa ibang bansa. So, clash of cultures often leads to mutual hatred. Of course, kapag ang isang tao, hindi sila, or let's say, ang isang bansa, kung meron tinatawag na racism, di ba? Yung parang nagkakaroon tayo ng, what do you call that? Nagkakaroon tayo ng pagbash or judgment sa isang tao, sa isang kultura, most likely magkakaroon talaga ng alitan. Magkakaroon ng war, diba? Kaya nga nagkakaroon ng war sa isang bansa because we cannot accept one another. Because ang aim natin dito is aside from sustainable tourism, we are also aiming for diversity or cultural diversity. Na wherein, ang aim ni cultural diversity is for us to accept and respect one people from another. Because we are going to meet a lot of various people. Lalong-lalo na kung ikaw yung tao na gustong-gusto mo mag-travel, so you really need to learn their culture, and at the same time, they will also learn about your culture. So it's like a give and take process. So, according here, visitor and native celebrated the first Thanksgiving together. Because in other countries, like for example, in United States of America and Canada, they are really doing yung tinatawag na Thanksgiving. So, ano ba yung Thanksgiving? So, it is a federal holiday. So, holiday siya sa Canada and United States. So, ano yung ginagawa nila during the Thanksgiving? Most likely, meron silang mga bisita na pwedeng nanggaling sa ibang bansa, nanggaling sa ibang lugar. At ang mostly ginagawa nila is, of course, they are praying, they are having a feast, nagkakainan, merong celebration or family bonding, nanonood sila ng mga football games, mga soccer games, and all that. And because ang pinaka-aim din ng Thanksgiving is to celebrate the harvest and blessings of the past year. So, ibig sabihin, they are having a simple dinner, diba? Thanksgiving dinner for them to commemorate yung mga nangyari sa mga nakaraang taon, okay? Sa mga blessings or sa mga kasaganahan na na-receive nila within the year and over the past year. So, that is the purpose of Thanksgiving. But here in the Philippines, most likely ginagawa talaga natin to every Christmas. So, Christmas to New Year, most likely yun yung parang Thanksgiving natin. So, government assistance at national, regional, and local levels. So, dito sinasabi lang that the government, whether anong klaseng mang economic system yan, there should always be a support coming from the government. 'Di ba? So, kung meron tayong tamang mga infrastructures, 'di ba, na ipo-provide sa local community within the country, mapa local, regional, national man yan, so most likely magiging maayos yung takbo ng ekonomiya ng isang bansa. And at the same time, mas magbo-boost yung tourism industry. So, personal security and safety of tourists. So, sinasabi dito that unable to ensure the personal security of tourists looking for extreme experience, he was quoted as saying, "I understand all about wanting to have an adventure, but Iraq could be a one-way trip. This is not the place for tourists now." So that is according to the Wall Street Journal, published last October 7, 2004. So sinasabi lang dito that, di ba kasi there are countries na talagang puro gera yung nangyayari. Like for example, sa Iraq, sa Iran. So most likely for them, hindi pa talaga nila aim na i-boost yung tourism industry. They understand that the people want to visit their country for some kind of adventure, di ba? For some kind of leisure and pleasure. But sabi nga dito, Iraq could be a one-way trip. Baka pag pumunta ka doon, hindi ka na makauwi, di ba? Hindi ka secured. Hindi ka na makauwi ng buhay because most likely, ang kanilang bansa is not really stable. Hindi talaga masyado pang secured because of the war na nangyayari o yung mga gera na nangyayari sa kanilang bansa. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So, personal security is the prime consideration. War, terrorism, and natural disasters are anathema to tourism. So, sinasabi lang dito na ito yung mga threats, yung mga pwedeng mangyaring hindi maganda sa isang bansa, sa isang location. So, na dapat mas pahalagahan natin because you must also consider yung probability of natural disasters pag magta-travel ka. Alamin mo muna kung may paparating bang bagyo kung magta-travel ka, lalo na if you're going to travel through air and water transportation, di ba? So, alamin mo muna kasi baka mamaya you are going to book for that kind of destination or magbubook ka ng particular travel plans mo, pero ang ending makakancel lang yung flight. Madidelay lang because hindi maayos yung weather condition sa particular country or location. So, access to well-equipped medical facilities and competent medical staff. It is also important because ang isang turista, ang isang lugar, ang isang tourism industry, dapat lagi natin ma-feel yung security at safety. Hindi lang sa mismong lugar, pero syempre, hindi natin alam kung ano yung mga possible na mangyari. If there are emergencies, accidents, so there should always be a well-equipped medical facilities, medical staff. So, may mga ospital, may clinic, 'di ba, na available or existing doon sa lugar. And at the same time, within the area or within the tourist destination, there should also be a emergency first aid kit and of course, the existing strategy for tourists when things go wrong. So, ibig sabihin, lahat ng yan nakasalalay sa mga people in charge within the area or location. So, codes of ethics and behavior for tourists. So, dito, sinisimplify lang natin that you should always extend respect for local authority to the local population and culture. Because as a tourist, hindi mo naman pagmamayari o hindi ka naman dun talaga nakatira sa isang area na yun or sa isang destination. You are there to visit. Iba, 'di ba? So pag nag-visit ka sa isang lugar, hindi ka naman most likely magtatagal doon. Instead, baka ang mangyari migration na, 'di ba? Hindi ka naman siguro magma-migrate agad-agad. So most likely bumibisita ka lang, nag-e-explore ka lang kung ano yung ino-offer ng particular destination na 'yon. And if you are a tourist or if you are a visitor, you should extend respect, 'di ba? Respetuhin mo yung lugar at the same time yung mga tao sa lugar, yung kanilang mga kultura at yung kanilang mga paniniwala. And of course, those inappropriate gesture, 'di ba? Should or yung mga plain stupidity can create a confrontation with natives. Na usually you will end up as a loser. Because syempre, 'di ba? Isang bagay lang na mali yung gawin mo within the area. I-bash mo lang sila or i-criticize mo lang sila, 'di ba? So most likely may sabihin ka lang mali na hindi okay sa kanila, bastusin mo yung kultura nila, you will really end up as a loser. Ikaw yung mamumblema sa area nila. And most likely, bibihira yung tao na sasagip sa'yo, lalo na kung ikaw mismo yung may mali. So baka ang mangyari, makasuhan ka pa, 'di ba? Mapunta ka sa kulungan. So most likely, iniiwasan natin yung ganun. So, respect the culture and the local people within the destination. And lastly, if tourism is a social experiment intended to change the local culture, it is not the prerogative of patronizing tourists to impose the change. So, yung sinasabi natin ditong prerogative, hindi naman siya parang, hindi siya parang pinipilit. Hindi siya para natin na ini-impose sa public. Kasi kung ang aim lang ng tao is to have a social experiment para baguhin yung kultura ng isang lugar, therefore, wag na lang. Wag na lang ipatronize to ng mga turista. Hindi mandatory na ipatronize nila yung lugar na to kung ganun lang naman yung aim ng tourism. Because ang aim ni tourism is to enhance the culture. For the culture of a particular area to be popular, to be famous, mas kilalanin, 'di ba? Mas tangkilikin, mas ma-appreciate natin yung kultura, but not to change the culture. Because culture is something that is unique to a given country, to a given person. Yes, pwedeng magbago yan because of the innovation nowadays, because of the generation, but most likely, we want to preserve that culture. We want to protect the culture of the people within the area and the country. So, they should also make tourists aware of the provision of local code of ethics, social mores, and behavioral convention. So, social norms or mores, these are the norms set by the society largely for behavior and appearance. So, most likely, ito yung mga sineset natin na standard that a given society should behave like this and should look like this, yung kanilang personal appearance. And most likely, kung lalabagin mo yon, you are said to be called as a social deviant. Yun yung tawag sa'yo. Okay? So, those are the important points or the, let's say, the prerequisites for sustainable tourism. So, always bear in mind that all of the things being mentioned here in the presentation will be included in your next activity. And if you miss some points in our lesson video, feel free to rewind or replay the video. So, thank you so much for listening in our today's lesson and see you again next time. Keep safe.